Let's continue our reading. Yesterday, we read that the Buddha has the function of discovering and expounding the path. He also possesses a unique familiarity with the intricacies of the path not shared by his disciples. And his disciples follow the path that the Buddha refused and attain enlightenment afterward under his guidance. I will continue with this paragraph. The polemical literature of later Buddhism sometimes depicts the Buddha as motivated by great compassion and his Arahant disciples as cool and aloof, indifferent to the plight of their fellow beings. As if to forestall this criticism, text chapter 10, section 5.2 states that not only the Buddha, but Arahants, as well as learned and virtuous disciples still in training, arise for the welfare of many people, live their lives out of compassion for the world, and teach the Dhamma for the good, well-being, and happiness of their fellow beings, devas as well as humans. Thus, if this text is taken as authoritative, it cannot be claimed that compassion and altruistic concern are qualities that distinguish Buddhas from Arahants. This paragraph, polemical, here means controversial. Controversial literature of Buddhism depicts Arahants not in a favorable way. In what way? As cool and aloof. They don't care about other people, about the fellow, about the suffering of the fellow beings. But the sutta in section 5.2 says otherwise, that the Arahants also have compassion for others. Next paragraph, Sister Chaikon, would you like to continue?
Text chapter 10, section 5.3 gives us another perspective on this question. Here, the Buddha challenges the Venerable Sariputta's bellowing utterance by asking him whether he fully knows the moral discipline, qualities, perhaps concentration, wisdom, meditative dwellings, and liberation of the Buddhas of the past, present, and future. To this, the great disciple can only answer in the negative. But Sariputta declares that he knows that all the Buddhas of the three periods of time attain perfect enlightenment by abandoning the five hindrances, by establishing their minds in the four establishments of mindfulness, and by developing correctly the seven factors of enlightenment.
Thanks, Sister Chaikon. So here the Buddha asks Sariputta, Venerable Sariputta, whether Venerable Sariputta knows all the qualities of the Buddha, fully knows. Then Venerable Sariputta answered, no, can only answer in the negative. But still, Sariputta declares that he knows that the Buddhas attain perfect enlightenment by abandoning the five hindrances, establishing mindfulness, and develop seven factors of enlightenment. Sister Aikin, would you like to continue?
These, however, are aspects of the path that the that Buddhas have fulfilled in common with Arahant disciples. Beyond this, the Buddha possesses certain qualities that elevate them above even the foremost of the Arahants. From the Nikayas, their superiority seems to rest on two main pillars. First, their being is essentially for others, in a way that the most altruistic of the Arahant disciples can only emulate but never equal. And second, their knowledges and spiritual powers are much greater than those of the Arahant disciples. The
Thanks.
Buddha's
You can continue.
Okay. The Buddha states that even monks fully liberated in mind, who possess unsurpassable vision, practice, and liberation, venerate the Tathagata because his attainment of enlightenment helps others to attain enlightenment. His deliverance helps others gain deliverance. His realization of Nibbana enables others to realize Nibbana. Majjhima Nikaya 35.26. In text chapter 10, section 5.4, we encounter two sets of qualities considered special endowments of a Buddha, enabling him to roar like his lions roar in the assemblies and set rolling the wheels of Dharma. These are the 10 Tathagatas' power and the 4 grounds of self-confidence, though several of these powers are shared by his disciples. In their totality, these two sets are distinctive of a Buddha and equip him to guide and instruct beings in accordance with their individual aptitudes and dispositions. The 4 grounds of self-confidence conferred upon the Buddha a bonus of authority and magnitude of mission that only the founder of a religion can exercise. Text chapter 10, section 5.5 compares the Tathagata to the sun and moon. For his appearance in the world is the manifestation of great light and dispels the darkness of ignorance. Text chapter 10, section 5.6 compares him to a man who rescues a herd of deer from calamity, thus portraying him as a general benefactor of humanity.
Okay.
Thank
Next
you.
is item. Now we are going in depth exploring the distinguishing factors between the Buddhas and the Arahants. Okay. First pillar, the being, this one is talking about the Buddha. The Buddha actually essentially arises for others in a way that the most altruistic Arahant disciples can only emulate but never equal. While in the previous paragraph talks about Arahants being cool and aloof, but still compassion to care for others like the Buddha is the quality that only the Buddha has. I would say the most supreme that the Buddha has. And while the Arahants have some of this compassion as well, but they can never match the Buddha's level of compassion. That's the first pillar. Second pillar, the knowledges of the Buddhas and spiritual powers are much greater than those of the Arahant disciples. This is interesting. One time I asked Shifu, don't everyone who already liberated, do they have the same level of spiritual power? Actually, the answer is no. Attaining arahantship means that one has fulfilled the requirement to be liberated, which, if you go back to the previous table, all the 10 factors are eliminated. That's the most basic requirements of being arahants. But the Buddha has many other qualities that the Arahants don't have, which is plain further in the subsequent paragraph that Sister Aikim just read. So Shifu gave this analogy. There are many headsets and headphones. The minimum requirement for being a headphone or headset, they should produce sound when you connect it to a device. Yeah. But some headsets are more advanced than the others. So let's take the example of mine. Yeah. This one is pretty advanced because this has a feature of noise cancelling and it's wireless. Some headsets are still wired, so both headsets can produce sound. But while both have met the minimum requirement, we can say this headset has a far more advanced features. Likewise, the Buddhas and the Arahants, they both are liberated, but the Buddhas have knowledge and spiritual powers that are much greater than the Arahants. I would say there's a pretty good analogy given by Shifu. And the subsequent paragraph talks about all the distinguishing qualities of the Tathagatas compared to the Arahants. The 10 powers highlighted in yellow here. And then the 4 grounds of self-confidence, which we will read in the sutta. Okay. Sister Shawmei, would you like to continue?
With text 10, text chapter 10, 5, subsection 7. We return to the metaphor of the lion's roar, introduced earlier, with a lengthy simile that compares the Buddha's proclamation of universal impermanence to the roar of a lion when he emerges from his den. Like the closing passage of the first sermon, see text chapter 2, subsection 5, this text draws our attention to the cosmic scope of the Buddha's mission. His message extends not only to human beings, but reaches to the high heavenly realms, shaking the delusions of the deities. Finally, text chapter 10, 5, subsection 8, offers us a series of brief explanations why the Buddha is called the Tathagata. He's called the Tathagata because he has fully awakened to the nature of the world, its origin, its cessation, and the way to its cessation. Because he has fully comprehended all phenomena within the world, whether seen, heard, sensed, or cognized. Because his speech is invariably true, because he acts in conformity with his words, and because he wields supreme mastery within the world. The text ends with an inspired poem, probably attached by the compilers of the Canon, which celebrates the Buddha as the supreme refuge of the world.
Okay, can you read the last paragraph as well?
The personal devotion towards the Tathagata, expressed by both the prose text and the poem, introduces us to the warm current of religious feeling that runs through early Buddhism, always present just beneath its cool and composed exterior. This religious dimension makes the Dharma more than just a philosophy or an ethical system or a body of meditative techniques, animating it from within, drawing its followers upward and onward. It makes the Buddha a complete spiritual path, a path rooted in faith in a particular person who is at once the supreme teacher of liberating truth and the foremost example of the truth he teaches.
Thanks, Sister Shomi. With that, we have finished reading the introduction. Tomorrow we will dive into the sutta. Okay. Let's do a quick recap. Okay, firstly, the one that Sister Shomi read, firstly is about the lion's roar, the metaphor of the lion's roar. A simile that compared the Buddha's proclamation as the roar of a lion when he emerges from his den. And then we read about a series of brief explanations why the Buddha is called the Tathagata. It is, of course, because the Buddha has fully awakened to the nature of the world. This is all the liberation part. And then the text ends with a celebration of the Buddha as the supreme refuge in the world. And then the last paragraph talks about the Dharma, a complete spiritual path. A path rooted in faith in a particular person who is at once the supreme teacher of liberating truth. And not just that, he is also the embodiment, the foremost example of the truth he expounded. Okay, so any questions or comments? So the one we read today is mostly about the distinguishing factors, distinguishing qualities of the Buddhas compared to the Arahants. Some of the Arahants might share some of the Buddha's qualities, but they can never equal the level of the Buddhas. That will be the main point for the one that for the paragraphs that we read together. If no questions or comments, Sister Shomi, would you like to do the dedication?
回向，愿消三障诸烦恼，愿得智慧真明了，普愿罪障悉消除，世世常行菩萨道。
Thanks, Sister Shomi. Till we meet again, may we be guided by the Buddha, Dhamma, and the Sangha. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.